Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the March 24th special meeting of the Committee on City Services. I'm City Councilor Stan Moulton. I am presiding along with Vice Chair Councilor Marianne Labarge. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. Laura, would you call the roll, please?
Councilor Moulton.
Here.
Here.
Councilor Dow.
Here.
Here.
Thank you. We will now take, if anybody who is either in the room or online who wants to offer public comment at this point, you're welcome to. I should say that after the presentation by Chief Cartledge and Director LaScalia, we'll have questions following that from the committee, and then we'll take questions from other counselors as well as the public. So there's actually two opportunities for you to speak. Is there anybody in the room who signed up who wants to offer public comment? Okay, let me then offer my little preamble here. You can offer public comment today on anything. It doesn't have to be on the agenda. Thank you, Mayor. But it should be within the jurisdiction of the Committee on City Services, and that is the activities and operation of municipal government. And consistent with City Council rules, I ask you to limit your comments to 2 minutes. Please direct them to the committee and identify yourself by stating your name and your community of residence. So we'll start in the room with Liz George.
Hi, good afternoon. Elizabeth George. I live at 22 Wilson Avenue in Northampton. I wanted to comment today to encourage the committee to take some kind of action to help clear the sidewalks. I live on Wilson Avenue, which is the corner of Conn Street and Wilson, and right down from the street from the senior center. The sidewalks on my street and on Conn Street in front of the houses on the corner of Conn's and Wilson were not cleared pretty much all winter. I had a hip replacement in November, and then it dislocated again in January. So I was not able to drive, and I had to walk downtown. I've fallen on the street right at the building, which is owned by Kiter Construction. I had to call Kiter and complain because it's their responsibility to clear the sidewalks. And they told me that, well, the storms were coming so fast and furious and there was melting that they couldn't keep up with it. And I suggested to them that if the ice melt doesn't work, that they could go to the city lot and get sand for free, which would help alleviate the problem until they could get it cleared. So I'm concerned about other people that live on my street, that live on Conn Street, the seniors. I myself have fallen, and I think that there's really no excuse for property owners to clear their sidewalks. I clear mine. I hire people to do it when I can't do it. And I think the city needs to take whatever steps they need to take under law in order to encourage people, not just suggestions or warnings, but fines to get the problem alleviated. And I understand from pictures that I've seen that it's a pretty ubiquitous problem around the city. So thank you for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, online, I see Nan S. Can you unmute yourself, Nan?
I think so. Can you hear me?
You can.
Great. Nancy Smith, Chapel Street. I want to thank Councilors Dubs and Rothenberg for organizing this discussion, Director LaScalia and Chief Cartledge for joining, and City Services for hosting. I think it's safe to say that more than just the cars on North Street went sideways during this very difficult and stressful storm for all. I'm grateful to see we are moving forward as a community to find and implement solutions in process, equipment, resources, or whatever is needed to help prevent future issues. I want to mention from what I saw, the 24 hours to clear sidewalk rule, which works in a standard storm, made clearing the sidewalks nearly impossible for days in this case. Our condo was plowed the night of the storm, and the contractor came back the next day to clear the city sidewalk as usual. The day after freezing rain and temperatures, even with borrowed sidewalk clearing equipment, he got nowhere on the sidewalks. The city sidewalk was unpassable for far too many days, and my sincere apologies for that. Our internal walkways that had been cleared of snow before the freezing rain were a sheet of thin ice for days, but regular salting could have handled that. The city sidewalk was just a solid block of ice, and unfortunately, our residents are mostly seniors incapable of pickaxing ice. I do realize resources are not easy to come by in a storm, and rescinding the 24-hour grace period completely would be difficult. Perhaps a freezing rain clause could be implemented as needed and announced like a parking ban. All that said, I'm grateful we have the experts here whose knowledge and experience can be utilized to help prevent these road and sidewalk issues for the future. I would also be supportive of additional resources needed by the city to implement your suggestions and/or to clear the downtown or other heavily traveled sidewalks. Thanks to all of you, and a special thanks to Benjamin Spencer for always clearing our local fire hydrants. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, in the room, next up is Jim Winston.
Thank you. Good afternoon, James Winston, Ward 2, Northampton. First, I just want to thank Councilor Rothenberg for her tireless advocacy for those in her ward during the last ice storm. Thank you so much for your work on that. And I do think we need to differentiate in terms of homeowners between people that may be not physically capable, not have the financial wherewithal to hire someone, versus I think there are some folks, unfortunately, who may just go away on vacation for a week or two and not make arrangements while they're gone. And we saw this problem. I saw it on Elm Street, and I think that people that when they go away, if they go away during the winter, they have to make sure that's covered. But I want to ask, but department chair here for the DPW and the police chief, my concern is about the snow that's piled into the middle of Main Street. This has gone on for years. And I mean, the larger, the proposed redesign of Main Street, the line we hear is that it's done for safety, and it's a pretext. We've got snow that's piled. I'm 56. I've lived in Northampton my entire life. We have snow that's piled into the middle of Main Street. If you're coming from the Academy of Music, you want to make a left onto Center Street or Gothic Street, and you've got a snowbank in front of you, it shouldn't take days and weeks and then eventually until the snow melts for the snow to go. That obstructs vision for drivers. It obstructs pedestrians from being seen. That's a clear safety issue, not to mention first responders, fire, police, the ambulances trying to navigate Main Street, and they're limited with the snow. So if we narrow Main Street under this current plan, where's that snow going? And let me say that if the city and the DPW has the capability to say, well, if we narrow Main Street, we're going to get rid of the snow, then if they could do it in the future, then why can't they do it now? It's a clear safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, online we have Fred Zimnock. Are you able to mute, unmute yourself, Fred? You've been asked to unmute, Fred. Okay, Fred, I'm sorry that we're having such problems. I know we had a problem in the last council meeting hearing from you. Try to get back online here, Fred, and we'll come back to you. I'll go now to Ace Talo. Ace, are you able to unmute?
Yes, I am.
Good.
Ace Talo, Ward 3. Specifically, I want to talk about the snow clearing measures. I have a commute from Fruit Street across Old South Street into the center of town. Over this winter, there was an ongoing problem with clearing the sidewalks in front of Old South. The 24-hour removal time, I don't think is sufficient. What I frequently saw was people would walk back and forth over the snow within that 24-hour period when nothing would got cleared. I did call in more than once over the course of this winter to get that area cleared. What ended up happening is when the clearing happened, and I'm not sure if it was by the DPW or by the property owners, the snow got tamped further down, which didn't immediately cause a problem, but down the line increased the amount of ice. This has been happening year after year after year. I don't think it's reasonable to have that 24-hour period for the safety of pedestrians. Likewise, I don't think it's reasonable to reduce that 24-hour period if residents are expected to clear their own walks, as we can't be immediately available to clear things. If the snow ends when we're at work, we're out of luck. I think a more effective method would be for the city to do that sidewalk clearing in the same way that the city does road clearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ace. Is there anybody else in the room who didn't sign up who wants to speak now? Okay. I see online, I see now Shelley Berkowitz.
Yes, thank you. First of all, to Councilors Dubs and Rothenberg and the city for hosting this event. Listening to these comments, detailed comments from people here, sharing their firsthand actual experiences and concerns about city services, particularly the snow clearing, etc., has been really great to hear. So I'm not here to add any particular details more about that. I experienced what you all described myself in my neighborhood. What I want to just be on record to express is how much I really appreciate this refreshing opportunity here that to allow residents to give meaningful input instead of just being notified by the city after the fact when something has been decided about or some plan has been decided on, without asking us, the residents and taxpayers, for meaningful input. So that to me is the most important change that needs to be sustained in the city for all of our elected officials. So thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. And for the record, please, your place of residence?
Northampton, Ward 1.
Thank you. Okay, seeing nobody else who wants to give public comment at this time, we will now proceed. We have minutes from March 3rd, which were distributed earlier this afternoon. Did councils on the committee have a chance to review those minutes? Yes? Yes, okay. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes of March 3rd then, please.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Councilor Dubs, seconded by Councilor Labarge to approve the March 3rd minutes. Any discussion, additions, changes, deletions? Hearing none, we're all here. We can vote. We don't need a roll call. Those in favor of adopting the March 3rd minutes, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes are approved unanimously. Okay, so now we are on to our main agenda item, and I thank Director LaScalia, Chief Cartledge, and the mayor for attending this meeting. I'm going to introduce it by reading the questions that have been sent on to Director LaScalia and Chief Cartledge to address today. This is a summary of our discussion at the March 3rd meeting. And some additional specific questions were sent to me by Councilor Dubs, which were incorporated and sent along to Director LaScalia and Chief Cartledge. So the questions are these. What DPW positions are currently vacant, and how do they affect the city's ability to respond to winter storms in a timely manner? What needs to be done to fill those vacancies? Does the DPW have the equipment and staff available to clear sidewalks and curb cuts rather than relying on property owners? If not, can the police department and DPW assign staff to monitor sidewalks and curb cuts that are not cleared within 24 hours after a storm ends, rather than relying on complaints from citizens? What is the reasoning behind issuing verbal warnings and giving violators cards specifying the city ordinance instead of issuing fines? How much time passes, hours, days, between when the warnings or cards are given out and when the snow and ice clearing occurs? And then I want to say that one thing we won't be talking about today is wages and benefits, because the city is currently engaged in collective bargaining with IUOE Local 98, the bargaining unit that represents the majority of public works employees, in order to ensure that the city fulfills its legal obligation of good faith bargaining. I remind all the councilors on the committee that we must refrain from discussion of wages, benefits, and other subjects of bargaining that could interfere with ongoing negotiations. So I will now ask first Director LaScalia and then Chief Cartledge to address in however they want the questions that were sent to them.
Hi, councilors. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. So I believe the first question was what we have for vacancies. So right now we have 23 vacancies out of 82 full-time positions. Those vacancies are an assortment of laborers, equipment operators, truck drivers. Do have 2 engineering vacancies and 1 administrative clerk vacancy, which would not impact our snow removal operations. But certainly the Local 98 members, who are the truck drivers, equipment operators, and laborers, would all be engaged in snow removal operations. Those vacancies fluctuate based on time of year and just kind of people coming and going. Some of these are entry-level positions, so we do see some level of turnover and always have. But I will not say that it's an insignificant number of vacancies. It does not impact our ability to rapidly respond to any situation. We are always equipped to respond to any weather event that we have. We have people who are on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are fully staffed in the winter, 3 shifts a day, including weekends, including holidays. And those numbers, though they may seem like there are a lot of vacancies, do not affect our ability to mobilize for a snowstorm. So the fact that we have these vacancies did not impact our ability to respond to the President's Day weekend storm. The challenge with that storm is that we had 4 different types of precipitation for nearly 36 hours. So we had snow, we had sleet, we had freezing rain, we had rain, and then we had a flash freeze over a period of like 36 hours, and the flash freeze happened in about 90 minutes. That's what impacted the condition of the roadways. It did not have anything to do with our available personnel. So I think it's just important when we think about ongoing weather events and the DPW's ongoing response to keep this storm in the appropriate context and understand that this was an extraordinarily long duration storm with really a perfect storm of precipitation hitting frozen ground. If the storm happened today, the ground is not frozen. So if it rains, like it's raining right now, it's not forming ice on the roadway. If it rains in January, when there's a couple of feet of frost in the ground, when that rain hits the ground, even though it's falling as rain, it instantly changes to ice. And it changes to ice on 160 miles of roadway simultaneously. There is no amount of personnel and equipment that can stop the formation of ice on 160 miles of roadway when it's all happening at the same time. So I think it's just important when we think about the storm, when we think about what happened to the roadways, and obviously this was a regional event. It was a widespread event through all of New England. This wasn't like, just a problem that happened in Northampton. I think there were challenges with this storm that were felt in every state and every municipality. So I hope that I've answered those questions, and I don't know if there's anything else. Question.
Well, I think I prefer that we hear, let's hear from Chief Cartledge, and then we'll go to questions. Councilor Barge, okay?
Go ahead.
Chief Cartledge.
Sounds like a plan.
Councilors, thank you for having me. Which you wanted me to answer the first part of that question, or?
Of what their questions were?
Whatever questions you feel that you're best positioned to address, Chief.
So as far as staffing, each shift we have 4 officers on patrol. In those hours of each shift, we're responding to numerous emergencies, motor vehicle accidents, medical calls, along with all the other calls that we receive. We also have a list of traffic complaints that we try to get to for speeding, stop sign, impaired operation, everything like that. So for 4 officers to be out there and try to look for sidewalks that aren't shoveled, it is really challenging for us. The reasoning behind our department giving verbal warnings on the city ordinance, I feel like with a lot of things with our department and our city, we try to educate the public to the way we do things here. In my 30 years as an officer here in Northampton, I can only think of a handful of times where a fine was written for this specific ordinance violation. My first year on, right next to where Radio Shack used to be, there was a used car dealership that went out of business, and there was a real problem with the sidewalk there. That was a case that was given to me, and yes, back then a fine for every 24 hours that the sidewalk was not cleared was issued to the property owner who lived nowhere near here. So I guess from a department aspect and angle, we go out when a resident calls or when an officer sees that the sidewalk is an issue. Some people may not know that we have an ordinance here that requires the homeowner, property owner, business owner to clear the sidewalk. Rather than walk up and hand them a citation for $50, our department is community oriented and we want to educate people to the ordinance. Certainly, if there's someone whose sidewalk is not cleared for multiple times and it becomes an issue, I guess we would issue a citation. But most of the time, the officer goes, talks to the owner, politely explains the ordinance, and then I'm just guessing, but within 24 hours, the sidewalk is clear. So that's our reasoning behind the not giving fines. We typically have enforcement by verbal warnings or handing them. We have these cards that we hand out with the ordinance written on it. The officer will go up and say, I don't know if you know, it's your responsibility or your landlord's responsibility to clear the snow after 24 hours, and please abide by that. The issue is that just because an officer, they typically are assigned to specific patrol areas, they may be off. They issue a verbal warning. They may be off for 2 days or a week after they give the warning. So the same officer might not be in the same area to go back and look. And like I said before, we are answering numerous calls for service, especially in a snowstorm, for multiple emergency situations with only 4 officers. So although we understand the ordinance, we try to educate the public without hammering everybody with a fine. That's just how we've operated since I've been here. So, is there any other part of that, Counselor?
Well, we'll go to questions now and thanks, Chief. So, Councilor Labarge.
No, I'll talk with Donna first.
Oh.
The chief. Thank you. Thank you for being here. We're hearing about the storm and so forth, and people need to realize here that it's just not our city. Many towns and cities had the same problem we have. My concern, Director LaScalia, is what I heard Attorney Runston mention about the piles of snow that are out on Main Street. I know with the redesign of Main Street, how are you going to be able to remove snow? That's a concern for many people. How are you going to move it when it's not being moved now? And make Main Street functional.
So we're pushing snow off of all of our city roadways right now. The stockpiling snow in the middle of Main Street is sort of a historical phenomenon that's a little bit unique. When that option no longer exists, it will no longer be exercised. So the snow will be cleared off of Main Street the same way it's cleared off of every other street. We stack our trucks. We run sometimes 2-3 trucks in tandem. I don't know if you see the way they plow 91, how they stack the trucks sort of in a diagonal. That's how we push snow off of our main arterials, and that is how we will plow Main Street.
Okay. And how many staff are you short? I couldn't hear that number.
23.
And that is not including with the regular staff that do the plowing, correct? They've been working. Your regular staff.
So that
do
does
the plowing and
include
so forth.
So that 23 does include staff members who would be assigned to plow if they worked here.
Okay.
So we are definitely short staff.
I gotcha.
But that does not impact our ability to respond.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's it. Thank you.
Other councilors on the committee? Councilor Dubs?
Sure. If you don't mind, thanks. First, just thank you so much for being here. So I guess what I'm most concerned about is just the ordinance itself that requires property owners to clear their own areas. And so while I appreciate us talking about the most recent storm, I also think it's really important just to recognize that this, I completely agree with you. This was a particularly bad storm, so I don't want to say that I'm disagreeing with you on that. But I have, just as a resident of Northampton for 20 years, it has been an ongoing issue that's been happening every year. Maybe it's not every storm, maybe it's only certain storms that are really when they're really bad. But there are times in the winter, many times in the winter, when it's the simple fact is that many people just can't go out of their homes because their areas aren't cleared enough. So for me, this is a difficult issue because I'm not trying to criticize anyone. I just really want to see how we can make this enforcement of this ordinance better, basically. So I totally agree with you. Like your staff is able to respond in exactly the way you would. You're saying that you're responding in a way that no matter how your staff, even with the staff being short, you're still responding properly. And I'm not going to disagree with you on that. My question is, what can we do better? And I'm just wondering if you could just in an ideal world. I know that we have limitations. So even if you think it's impossible, let's just say you think this is impossible, what would it be? What would it entail for the city of Northampton to to be responsible for clearing more sidewalks, or sidewalks in general, and curb cuts, even if that's not the ordinance the way it is now. What if the ordinance were different and the city were made to be responsible for that? How would that change? How would you see that working in Northampton?
So we have more than 85 miles of sidewalks.
Yeah.
We have about 400 crosswalks and associated curb cuts. I mentioned the miles of street, 160 miles. Right now we're clearing about 7 to 8 miles of sidewalk, probably about 7.5. We'll split the difference. And that's in front of city buildings and city parks like, Arcanum Field or Florence Fields. That requires a dedicated machine, one dedicated person, and each sidewalk has to be plowed 3 to 4 times during the course of, say, like a 4-inch snowstorm. We would have to run that sidewalk machine through that route 3 to 4 times, one dedicated person, one dedicated machine. And then we have to have a dump truck chasing that machine to refill them with salt, because we can't just clear the sidewalk. We have to de-ice it, and then we have to keep it de-iced. So we can't just plow it and sort of drive away. We have to plow it. It's like the roads. We have to plow it. We have to plow it again. We have to plow it again. And then we have to de-ice it. And then we have to keep it de-iced. So there's sort of an ongoing maintenance associated with that. So I actually did contemplate, what would it take to take our 85 miles of sidewalk, and, how many people do I need and how many machines do I need? Mathematically, I would need between 10 and 12 sidewalk machines, because this type of work is very hard on the equipment. And if I lose a machine, it has to be backfilled with a different machine. This is why we have to have the fleet that we have, because when I need the truck to work, I need it to work. And if it doesn't work, I have to have a spare, because it's not acceptable to not have a spare. So we would have to make sure we have an appropriate fleet of sidewalk machinery, and then we would have to have the personnel to staff that sidewalk machinery. So we would need an operator for each machine, but we would also need to understand that people are on vacation, people are sick, people are on long-term leave for whatever reason, and we do have vacancies. So I need a person in each machine, and then I need a person in a truck chasing each machine. So you're looking at minimally at least 20 employees to sort of staff this, theoretical fleet of machinery, but you really have to have a plus 20 to 30% on that in order to feel confident that each machine will always be staffed, regardless of who's on vacation or who has the flu or, who has injured themselves and is out for 2 months or whatever. We would also have to consider the conditions of the sidewalks. So some sidewalks are in poor condition, as we know, and it wouldn't be appropriate to run a machine on those sidewalks, because it would actually destroy the sidewalk to a place where it's in even worse condition than it already is. We would also have tree conflicts. There's a lot of sidewalks that have roots protruding through them from public shade trees, and we would have to sort of strike a balance between running a machine on a sidewalk, which is a little different than shoveling a sidewalk. And what we would end up with is mechanical damage to a lot of our public shade trees. That would be a very poor outcome and not an ideal scenario that would actually be very detrimental to the city's tree canopy. So those are 2 factors that would need to be considered in any decision making.
Thank you. And now, considering like all of the challenges that you just mentioned, what about like what would you think about adding more sidewalks to like you currently do so in front of the city buildings? Like Main Street is a good example, the curb cuts and the sidewalks on Main Street. What if you just did Main Street? Like how much more difficult would your job be if you just did that? Or roads that are more traversed in Northampton?
taking on anything additional is going to require additional manpower and equipment.
Yeah.
So I would have to understand the scope of the request
Yeah.
in order to answer the question definitively. But at this point, we are tapped out with what we're currently doing with the machine that we have and the employee who drives it. That there's nothing more that we can take on without an expansion of that operation.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's kind of what I was asking or what I was wondering about. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't be able to be addressed in a timely manner.
Right. Okay. I'm good for now.
We can come back to you if you have further questions. Sure. Councilor Rothenberg.
Is Attorney Seawald taking questions? Great. Hello, Council. So I just want to know about your fundamental understanding of the city's responsibility to ensure that the sidewalks are clear.
Responsibilities for sidewalks implicate both federal and state law. Title II of the Americans with Disability Act requires that all facilities be maintained and be available for those with disabilities to use and enjoy. With regard to snow and ice, according to the Massachusetts Office on Disabilities, that responsibility can be discharged by having an ordinance requiring abutting landowners to clear snow and ice within a reasonable period of time. There's nothing in the ADA that says what a reasonable period of time is, and I think it's going to depend for ADA purposes on the type of storm. The storm we just had would be different than a 2-inch storm of nice fluffy snow. That's on the federal side. On the state side, it's a little different. The state statutes deal with keeping ways open and safe for travelers and free of defects. Specifically under Section 17 of Chapter 84, snow and ice is not considered a defect, and cities and towns under that statute have no obligation to remove snow or ice anywhere, and because it's not a defect and there's no liability attaching to the city for not clearing snow and ice. As a practical matter, any other interpretation of these laws would be shocking to the 300 some odd cities and towns that have significant public sidewalks, because each and every one of them delegates that obligation to the abutting landowners.
Follow up?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
So I heard you use the word discharged. That wasn't one I had seen yet. I'd seen delegated.
Delegated.
And I wonder if you have any case law or if you would make a memo on your understanding of where the delegation period sort of indemnifies or as you say, the way that I'm understanding what you're saying, if I can strike all that and start over, I'm understanding you to say that your reading is that by having this snow ordinance, the city is now free of the responsibility to make sure that they're clear. I'm wondering if you can expound upon that at a later date and in writing. That would be fantastic.
Very well.
Thank you.
Or you can respond right now if you feel you have
I would say that would be an and or, if you don't mind. I would also like the memo.
I think I have explain my understanding. When I used the word discharged, what I meant was, and I think the context I used it in was that the city has the obligation to keep public facilities clear, and they can discharge that by delegating to the abutting landowner that obligation to keep the way clear. So that's what I meant by discharge.
Yes, you're done with Attorney Sewell.
Yes.
Go ahead with Director LaScalia.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you can tell us more about these machines and if it's acceptable within any laws governing your wage negotiations, if you can tell us just about the current wages that we have in place for the people who can operate those machines. So I'm interested in what the machine is, what the cost of the machine is, and the current cost of operators, if that's all right.
We call it a sidewalk tractor. for lack of a better term. It's a small machine that fits on a sidewalk. It's narrow. It fits one operator. It runs on tracks. It has a hopper for salt and sand behind it, and it's not particularly big, which is why you need a truck to chase it, because it doesn't hold a lot of salt and sand. The cost of one of the machines is probably close to $250,000. They require a considerable amount of maintenance because, as you can imagine, they get beat up, particularly like with a storm that we just had where conditions are icy. There's a lot of obstructions, and it's not necessarily apparent where the traveled way is once you get off the road. And it takes a lot to keep them running. So that's sort of the minutia of the machines. All of the contracts and wages are posted on the city website. Local 98's contract is posted on the city website. There's salary tables associated with the contract, and they're in the appendix, so they're available for public viewing. The employee who's assigned to drive the sidewalk tractor is an equipment operator, and I would need an equipment operator to operate a sidewalk tractor.
Director Liscaya, I had a couple of follow-up questions for you as well. Does the city now hire private contractors to supplement its own staff during severe winter storms?
I try to hire private contractors, but there are no private contractors who are available.
So you would if you could, but you can't.
Yeah, I recruit very heavily, and we pay Mass DOT wages. We put, ads in the local paper, and we do what we can to spread the word. I speak with all the contractors who work for us and try to petition them for winter work with us. But it's a very competitive business. You may recall driving up and down 91, in like August, and there's a big yellow sign that says now hiring snowplow contractors, and that's Mass DOT. So everyone's got the same challenges.
What about the question of any availability of DPW staff to monitor unshoveled sidewalks?
I don't have personnel to monitor unshoveled sidewalks. All of our available personnel are working on stabilizing our operation. So to patrol the city would be something that would be an added duty for staff that is not available.
And the DPW now has one sidewalk tracker?
We have two sidewalk tractors. One of them is functioning. One we use as a spare. We use it for parts, or we use it in the case of an extreme emergency, like the sidewalk tractor we have isn't working. But I would not feel confident that I have two perfectly functioning sidewalk tractors that could be deployed without worry.
Mm-hmm. So in order to take on more sidewalk clearing, it would require an investment of up to perhaps 9 additional sidewalk trackers at $250,000 each.
It would. And again, I think it's important to note that the capital investment is one thing, but there has to be ongoing maintenance. And I also have to have the personnel to fix the tractors when they break in the middle of the storm. This last storm was particularly challenging. It beat on our equipment very, very hard. And almost all of our specialty equipment, including the sidewalk tractor, spent a considerable amount of time sitting in the mechanics bay waiting for attention. So if we were to make a capital investment in this new equipment, that would be great. We now have new equipment, but we also need to make an investment into the people to maintain this equipment.
Okay. hang on here. I have one more question before the Director Lascalia, and then we'll go to follow-ups. Last year, a year ago, in preparing and presenting your FY25 budget, there were several vacancies in DPW that you decided just to leave vacant and not pursue filling those positions for the current year, correct?
The jobs are always posted. So we have on the city website, we have job postings for the local 98 positions that are vacant, and those job postings always stay up. When I presented the budget, it's sort of a snapshot of a moment in time. And I put a placeholder in the budget book to hold that position in PS so that if we were to onboard somebody, the money exists in the PS section of the budget in order to pay them.
Okay, I thought there was at least a position that you weren't going to try to fill this year. Perhaps it was the clerical position?
It was a financial
Okay.
administrator position.
And that has nothing to do with the snow removal. Okay. So you anticipate then continuing to try to fill those 23 vacancies? Okay.
I do,
All right.
yes.
Now we'll take follow-up questions. I'll go to Councilor Labarge.
Thank you. Donna, I think the biggest problem we have, right from the beginning, Councilor Bill Joy and I did that ordinance of 24 hours. And I have to say, we had Bobby, who is very disabled, who came forth at City Council way back. And Bobby is the type with his disability that he has to use 2 crutches, and he has a problem moving one leg forward and taking whatever, his brace, and then take the other leg and bring it forth. And he came forth, and we have to give him a lot of credit. And it was one of the stores on State Street where they never shoveled at all. And it was him who helped design this ordinance. Because here is the problem I think that is occurring. We're having, say, people who are renting off condos and apartments, whatever. They do and are told that they can reach out to the maintenance department. And I'm wondering if people actually are being notified from these condos and apartments of the dire need of what their responsibility is to do, is to get out there and do the sidewalks to full length and also the curb cuts. I think this is really something to look at here for all apartment owners, condo owners, okay? Their responsibility. Every piece of property goes from pen to pen. That is their full responsibility with a sidewalk there. And I think our attorney will agree with me. Your property lines are there. So I think there needs to be some communication here. And I don't know if it's up to the mayor's office to do this, maybe in a census, when we're mailing out our census, of what the responsibilities are of even property owners here in the city. We do have a problem right now with seniors trying to find people. Driveways are not a problem. They'll be able to get companies, and I'm hearing this myself, but they don't want to do sidewalks. The senior center, for years, we have tried. Pat Shaughnessy did, Linda Desmond did. And, even the high school was notified with our youths. And another thing I think we need to look at, I talked with Patrick Caroline from the jail of a good program. Their lawyer said no because of legality. So we're trying to help. But I think we need to reach out, because I'm hearing a counselor saying that he was confined in his condo or apartment for 3 days because the sidewalk was not done. I'm listening. I think that somehow with our mayor and departments, we need to find a way to reaching out to all the owners here, business owners also, of their responsibility. and being told to all who they're renting from right down the line who to call for maintenance. That's the problem right there.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay.
If you would like
Thank you.
to.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you for having this conversation. Councilor Labarge, you referenced a previous time we've had this conversation in respect to Dr. Berkowitz. This is actually not the first time or sort of the only time that we've had conversations about this. I don't know if what you're referring to is more like 20 years ago, but 10 years ago, we actually strengthened this ordinance. And it went through a long process and went through one of the subcommittees. It was then what is now legislative matters was now ordinance. And I can't remember all the name of it, but it went through a whole process with that committee and had a lot of community discussion and strengthened this ordinance. And I think if I remember correctly, and Solicitor Seawold, I don't remember if you were the solicitor then, but I think it also changed the fine. So I think the fine, one of the problems previously had been that the fine was a criminal fine, which was not actually something that we could levy. And so we changed it to a civil fine and we matched it with Mass General Law and made it to the as strong as it could be according to Mass General Law. So so this is a conversation that I'm happy for us to revisit. And it seems like maybe we have it about every 10 years. I'm guessing it's usually prompted by a particularly bad storm and it makes us look at it. And that's good. That's exactly what should happen, is that we sort of revisit these things. And I wanted to share actually a really great suggestion after this storm that I got from a constituent was to include information in our parking ban robocalls and information that we put out, text and everything, reminding people about the ordinance and that they need to clear their sidewalks of snow and ice. And that, of course, assumes that people listen through those robocalls. I don't know if they do, but I thought it was a really good suggestion that I think we should incorporate into that communication and also put on the website. And whenever we have a snow emergency, make it as clear as possible to remind people in the moment of what our ordinance is. You, Councilor, also were just referring to maybe the Triad program. I think the last time there was a program that provided some kind of snow removal assistance, it had been with the sheriff's office in the Triad program. And so maybe now that's not available anymore. But, I feel like even 10 years ago, we talked about how can we reinvigorate, some sort of organization to help out during these storms with helping folks who are having trouble doing the snow removal themselves. So I'm happy to have conversations around that and see it's, I think with the high school or with students, it's hard because these kind of storms are sort of becoming less and less frequent. And so sort of creating an ongoing program when there isn't sort of a consistent need, I think can be hard to kind of get it going and have it keep going. So, but I'd be happy to talk about how we can look at some sort of organization that could help folks. And Donna, I don't know if you wanted to talk about this at all, but I do know that one of the things that you told me would be helpful is if we changed the parking ban ordinance, and that might be something that the council could really look at, and that would help with snow removal.
Sure. One of the things that's particularly challenging for us is that, so by ordinance, the Director of Public Works declares a snow emergency. And what the snow emergency does is it gives us the ability to remove cars that are parked on any city roadway between 12:01 and 6 a.m. And that's kind of the obscure part of the snow emergency that most people are not aware of. So we have a 6-hour window. The hours are a little bit different in certain parts of downtown, but we basically have a 6-hour window to ticket, tow, remove snow and de-ice before cars can go back onto the road. So one of the things that happened during this last storm, or let me back up, it matters what the timing of the storm is. If it starts snowing at 3:00 in the morning, a snow emergency does not do me any good. If it starts snowing at 10:00 in the morning and I have 7 inches of accumulation by 5 p.m., a snow emergency that starts at midnight really doesn't help us, particularly if we have sleet and freezing rain and then everything flashes over in an hour. because by 7 p.m., everything is frozen solid. And that's actually what happened to us on President's Day. So even though I let that snow emergency run for 2 days, because of the timing of the parking ban, there were cars in the way and they weren't doing anything wrong, but we actually couldn't get to a lot of places because there were cars in the way. And by the time those cars are moved, everything's so bound up solid with ice, I don't have the capability to de-ice. I actually can't move the ice because it's so solid. So one of the things that we could consider is changing the hours of no parking to give us a little more flexibility around when we're removing cars and giving us a little bit more time to complete our operation. Many municipalities do, you can't park on the street at all. We declare a snow emergency, your car needs to be moved until we undeclare the emergency. That's, a little bit of a nuclear option. But if you are looking for ways to improve this ordinance, part of the conversation may be an understanding that the timing of these storms matters. And when I have only a 6-hour window, and just because the snow emergency starts at 12 o'clock does not mean the street is clear at 12 o'clock. I mean, we actually have to go around and figure out, okay, is your car in the way? And now we have to get an officer to come ticket and call for a tow. And then one of the challenges we have is how many tow trucks are available and how long is it going to take to actually remove that car? It could be several hours before we can even get the car moved, if we can even move it at all. So I think that that's something that may bear a little closer look if you're inclined to make alterations to this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Lascalia. And I will just point out that one sort of natural place to move this conversation about reviewing the sidewalk clearing ordinance and the parking ban ordinance is the new ordinance review committee that has just been formed, and both Councilor Dubs and I will be serving on that committee. So that's a place I think where we can continue the conversation this year.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Labarge, you?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Councilor Rothenberg, you had a follow-up.
Yes, the follow-up was for the maintenance piece for those snow tractors. Who would that be? Is it also, who's qualified to do that?
Mechanics. So it's a fleet maintenance mechanic, and that's a local 98 position.
Okay. I've got some other questions, but I'll hold them until, does Councilor Clemmer have her hand up?
Okay. Well, I will now go to other councilors who are here. Yeah, go ahead, Council.
Thank you for having this city council, city committee. And thank you, Director Lascalia and Chief Cartledge for coming tonight. And so just one comment about the clearing the sidewalks and curb cuts. I sent an email out to my constituents in Ward 2, and I was stuck in my house for a couple of days too. It's just a sheet of ice and the curb cuts weren't cleared. So I sent an email out reminding people that they were responsible, and that seemed to have helped. And I appreciate you not ticketing people immediately and giving councilors a chance to work with their constituents around this. And Director Lascalia, I had a question about the salt. So there's been a lot of comments about not having salt and not using the salt, and salt could have saved everything. So could you just talk a little bit about the situation with the salt?
Sure. So we go in a typical scenario, we have about 4,000 tons of salt on hand at any given moment. We have 4,000 tons at the DPW right now. We use treated road salt. As you may have heard, there was a regional road salt shortage, and many communities were actually rationing salt or struggling with getting it and having to drive to salt yards in different states. Mm-hmm. We actually had a very large stockpile of salt on hand. It's something that I pay very close attention to for exactly this reason. So I make sure that we have a huge supply of road salt on hand at all times. So while many communities were in a position where they had to ration, we were in a position where we had plenty, and we were able to give it to residents. I mean, we actually had to set up like traffic cones out in the yard and continually fill the bin that we have with salt and sand, so that folks could come in and fill up buckets or bins or the back of their truck or whatever it was. So we're very fortunate that we were well prepared for this storm. In a typical storm, we use between 200 to 250 tons of salt. In this storm, we used about 1,000 tons. And we also had to get sand. So we always have sand on hand as well for enhanced traction. So we went through about 300 tons of sand, which we mix with the salt. We don't like to use sand because it makes a little bit more of a mess, but it's actually the only thing that works on ice. So we put down a massive amount of chemical to try to control road conditions. And we are very fortunate to have it on hand. Thanks for that question.
So just a follow up. So people were, just reading comments, people were commenting that you didn't put down enough salt or you didn't put it down in time, but it seems like you couldn't, if you would have put the salt down earlier, it would have just melted away in that, in all the water that was on the ground. I mean, you couldn't really jump ahead of it because the freeze happened so quickly. Is that?
Yeah, we apply salt a few different ways. So we pre-treat our roads. So before anything even happens, we pre-treat the roads, meaning we salt them so that we create a, it's almost like insulation between the precipitation and the road. So it helps to create a scenario where the snow does not pack onto the road. So we pre-treat all of our arterials and collectors and hills and emergency response routes like Prospect Ave, for ambulances or police. So we pre-treat. Then once it actually starts snowing, we engage in our plowing operations. Once plowing operations are complete, then we salt everything because we don't want to salt it while we're plowing, because then you're just plowing the salt into the gutter and that's a waste of resources. This storm was very challenging because we had 4 different types of precipitation. So it's snowing and then it's sleeting and then it's raining. So we pay $108 a ton for treated salt. So there is financial implications to our decision making around, do we want to be wasting this chemical, understanding that we're going to get an inch of rain in the next 2 hours. So we never want to throw salt when we have heavy rain, which is just going to wash it away. So this storm was particularly challenging because it's snowing, it's raining, it's sleeting, it's freeze raining, and we don't want to waste the chemical, particularly when we understand there's a regional shortage. Though we had quite a bit on hand, it's very difficult to know what the future is going to hold. And if we're burning through 1,000 tons of chemical in 2 days, and I can't get more, that's a problem, and it's raining. So I think there's a balancing act between what we're applying and when we're applying it and what the weather's doing. But I would never be salting in the middle of a heavy rainstorm like we had.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna, for everything that you do. And I have to say, many people on my ward were very happy that they were taken care of after that storm, and they knew how critical it was. They were very understanding about that. After that storm was over, the calls were coming in. I called your department. They were excellent, excellent. They went and did their streets. People understood the conditions that occurred here. I have another resident on my ward who is an assistant director at another city. Same problem. Same problem. So thank you, and thank your staff for everything you do in our city. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councilor Labarge. I'm going to go for one more round of questions from committee members. We've got about 25 minutes left for this section of the meeting, and I'd like to leave some time to see if anybody who's here or online wants to ask any questions. So, Councilor Dubs.
Thank you. First, I'd like to address what the statement that Councilor Clemmer just made. And with all due respect, Councilor Clemmer, you were not stuck in your house for 3 days. You were not stuck in your house. Disabled people were stuck in their house. You were not, because you can walk. So don't make a statement like that. Please don't ever make a statement like that again. It's offensive. You were not stuck in your house. I was. I'd like to thank the attorneys Alan Seawald for talking about clearing up what the law is. I was actually going to say the same thing that he said. The municipality is ultimately responsible for the clearing of the sidewalks. Our snow ordinance is what we use to keep us compliant with that law. And if we're not properly enforcing it, if 3 days go by when people are stuck in their house, for real stuck, that means we're not in compliance with the ordinance or Massachusetts law. So what I'm here to do is not to criticize the government, not to criticize any people here, and not to, and I don't even want to focus on the snow that just happened, on the storm that just happened. I'm here to talk about how we're going to get better at enforcing this ordinance, because I've been doing this, talking about this since I joined the Disability Commission in 2019. We have had regular meetings on our commission, more than once a year. We have meetings on our commission to talk about this, have this very conversation. And you know, it's actually a dream come true for me to be here right now and to be having this conversation with the city, with the city officials. This is amazing for me because I've been working at this my entire political career, if you want to call it that. Ever since I got in government, this is what I've been working for, this meeting right here. So I'm not trying to criticize anybody, just saying that this ordinance is what keeps us in compliance. And so we need to focus on the facts and action, the actions that we're going to take to make it better, to make us more compliant. So I guess, Chief Cartledge, I just want to ask you, with all due respect, you know, like I'm saying, with all due respect to everybody, with the ordinance that we have in place, addressing Councilor, what she said again, Councilor Clemmer, she thanked you for not ticketing people. I'm here to say the opposite. I want to know how are we going to enforce this ordinance better? How are we going to, like, can we find people? Like, why aren't we finding people? I know you've explained that, but we need to find people. We need to find them in order to make them, know that they need to do this, because it's legal, their legal responsibility. So if they're not being fined, they don't really have an incentive other than to be nice people. And not everybody is, and also not everybody is able to do it, so sorry. But I would like to see more fines being placed, because 5 years have gone by, and according to the email that you sent to Councilor Rothenberg, not a single fine has been issued in the last 5 years. And I just want you to know, like, from my heart, that when I found that information out, it was heartbreaking and shocking. And when I let my other disabled friends know that no fines have been given out in the last 5 years, they were shocked and angered. Because we have been talking about this for years on our commission, our disability commission, and to find out, and we've been told this whole time that this ordinance is what's protecting us. This ordinance is what we need to, is what's protecting disabled people in Northampton. So find out that nobody has been fined. It almost sounds like we've been lied to for the last 5 years. That's how it feels. I'm not saying you are not a liar. I'm not calling, you are a great person. I'm just trying to express to you how important this is, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. Thanks.
I would just say I understand, but us going to someone's property and giving them a verbal warning, in my opinion, is still enforcement. Do some people deserve fines? Probably, but that's only when there's a problem property that they aren't complying with. If we go to the property and say,
The chief wants you.
please clear your sidewalk, and then within the next 24 hours, it's clear. Like, I don't know why we would find them unless, what you're saying is you want the police to go out and find them right away.
Well, sir, that's what the ordinance says. It says that they're going to be fined. So if they're not being fined, then we're not following the ordinance.
Okay. I get what you're saying. I understand.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry. You don't have to. You can. I don't.
I mean, I can certainly tell our officers every snowstorm, go out and find everybody that has on shoveled sidewalk. I don't feel like that would be a good way for the police to interact with the community, but I understand your point of view.
So and actually, I'm glad you said that because I understand your point of view too, and I think that that's why we are in a conundrum because you don't want to find people, and yet. And, actually, I don't want to find people either, but this ordinance is what we have. And therefore, if we're not finding people, then what are we doing? So yeah, no, I appreciate your honesty and your openness. So I'm just glad that we're having this conversation.
If the ordinance, I'd have to reread it again, but if the ordinance doesn't allow us to give verbal warnings, I mean, we have city ordinances for speeding. We still give verbal warnings. I'd have to reread that ordinance as well. But in my opinion, in Northampton, the way we police here, we're still getting compliance with verbal warnings. Although the ordinance may not say we can give verbal warnings, handing someone a $50 ticket right off the bat is not the way I would operate, but I do understand your position and I totally get it.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chief Cartledge. Now,
Thank you.
I've been asked by Attorney Seawald, he wants to address the fining issue. And then Councilor Clemmer would like to respond. So we'll go first to Attorney Seawald and then back to Councilor Clemmer.
Thank you, Councilor. This is a conundrum and this is a very difficult issue and I don't want to minimize it. However, fines don't get the snow off the sidewalk. What fines do is give the landowner 3 options. So what happens, they get a ticket. They can pay the ticket, snow still on the sidewalk, the matter is closed. They can contest the ticket and get a hearing before a magistrate in the Northampton District Court. Snow is still on the sidewalk, now we're waiting for a hearing in District Court. The third thing they can do is ignore the ticket because there's no penalty for ignoring the ticket. And then it's up to the city to swear out a criminal complaint and go through a criminal process in the Northampton District Court. I think that what the chief is trying to convey is that those who are unaware and who will respond to an approach will respond just as well to an approach of education. And I think what we should focus on is how we can follow up better on those warnings, because the idea here is to get compliance, not to get $50. And
exactly, I completely agree with you on that. Yeah.
And sometimes leading with the $50 ticket is pushing people into, a more lengthy process that might be avoided by simply having a conversation. And that's all I really want to say is that the $50 is not the panacea. It's not going to clear the sidewalks for somebody who is not inclined to clear the sidewalks anyway with a verbal warning. And, the Northampton District Court process is a lengthy one, and the sidewalks will be cleared by the time you get through the process, just because it'll get warm out. And, that's all I wanted to say. I didn't want anybody to believe that, issuing a ticket is the remedy that's going to clear the sidewalk. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. If I could just follow up. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I guess I just feel like if finding is I agree it's not the remedy, but if we're not finding people and we're seeing that certain places aren't being cleared,
Right.
then what if we find people more? I'd like to at least know, you know what I mean? I guess because we haven't been doing it. So I guess, and one option in my mind is to find people more, than we are right now. So it's not that I like saying that. I don't want to find anybody, Sorry. So yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you, Attorney Sewell. Now, Councilor Clemmer.
Thank you. Councilor Dubs, I didn't mean to minimize what you go through during these storms. I know every storm is a challenge from you, a huge challenge. This one I know was much, much worse. I apologize if it came out late. I was minimizing your being trapped in your apartment or what you go through. But I was in my house literally for a couple of days. I couldn't go to the left of my house because there was a sheet of ice. To the right was my yard, and I could walk a few feet with the dogs, and that was it. Then I came back, and I didn't want to drive because I'm at the top of a hill, and the streets were a sheet of ice, so I didn't want to make more work for Chief Cartledge to rescue me somewhere. So I did stay home. I mean, if I really had to get out, I could have, but the streets were a sheet of ice. The sidewalks were. I really could not get anywhere. The corner, they didn't do this cut, so I couldn't even get out of there. So I just walked a little bit, and then I turned around with my dogs, and even the backyard, every place was ice. So, I mean, I didn't go out. Maybe I wasn't stuck, but I did not go out for a couple of days.
Well, there's a big difference because when people can't get to the grocery store, when they can't get to work, when they can't get to school, there's a problem.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And I just want to say, Councilor Dubs, I appreciate your passion. And this is a conversation that's been needed for years, as you've said. And I think that that we have a number of avenues to explore about looking at the ordinance and looking at ways to strengthen the enforcement. I think that you're right in saying that if people know that there's no fine, then that is probably an incentive or a disincentive for some. But there are many reasons why this the ordinance is not followed. There's ignorance, and that requires education. There's people simply unable to clear the sidewalk. We heard Director LaScalia describe the problems for a machine to go down. Cracked sidewalks, tree conflicts, and so forth. Well, that makes it impossible to do with even a snowblower in some instances. So it, requires people to do it themselves with a shovel. So we've got to look at how we can better educate and assist the community in enforcing this ordinance. I completely agree with that. Councilor Rothenberg.
So I just want to say I'm looking forward to continued conversation on this. I think Councilor Dubs and I both understood this meeting to be mostly an information gathering and information sharing. So I wanted to share right now some information that I got from my constituents. There's a few different issues that came up repeatedly. One is the issue of hardship on the constituents for clearing their sidewalks. And that can be financial and that can be physical. And that can be exacerbated by plows with their snow plow splash or plume or cast or whatever you call it. I guess I'll call it plash. So I would look forward to a continued discussion about that on a different day. I think that's a whole separate topic, and it brings into the conversation things like private plows and state plows and city plows and routes and alternatives. But I think it is an important topic because it will open up, I hope, a greater sense of city responsibility and a desire for the city to help, especially where the city is creating some excess piles of snow on sidewalks. And I'm very interested in the issue around the cost and what kinds of safety nets we can come up with, just as we do for many other kinds of costs, and we do for taxes and other things. One senior on a fixed income wrote to me and said that they paid $300 this year. And I know to many people in Northampton, that may not sound like a lot, but to others, that is $300 that simply cannot be pulled out of thin air and must be pulled out of food, and second mortgages and things like that. These things really do pile up for people. And I can say my own in-laws are old Hamp, and they moved to South Carolina because they couldn't afford raising taxes. You know, this is a real thing for a lot of people in our community, and they're just as important as the wealthier in our community. I also really want to just say that I think the monitoring piece is very important and a very good step that we should be eager to take. I hear Director Lascalia telling me that she doesn't have anybody extra who can monitor. I hear the chief telling me he doesn't have anybody. And that could be the case. And you might not be the ones. You might not be the place in the city to pull out an employee who can do this. I do think maybe thinking about which employees in the city have access to four-wheel trucks and things that could be out in the storm is maybe one of the most common sense ways to go about it. But I hope even if you're in conversations with the mayor about the budget and your needs, I hope you would consider this as a need of our community. And finally, I just want to read something. I think it's very eloquently written, and I think it represents the experience of many of our constituents who are in wheelchairs. And so I'm hoping that it will really center the importance of this conversation. And my question for anyone here would be, does this concern you? And does this make you sad? And does this make you want to act? I was a longtime resident of Northampton, born and raised. But ultimately, I had to move after becoming a full-time wheelchair user due to the city's lack of enforcement of the guidelines of snow removal. I tried many things to make my travel safe in order to stay, including carrying a shovel with me at all times. However, unfortunately, after one too many near-death experiences, I chose to move. I know I cannot ever return until this issue is sorted out. Back in 2019, around 6:30 p.m., a full day after the snow finished falling, I was rolling down New South Street and was near an intersection on my way to the Northampton Community Music Center for classes. It was dark, and I got to a point in the sidewalk that was not adequately plowed in my power chair. I tried to get around it as I'd forgotten my shovel that day, but I couldn't. I turned back and went into the road, to find the nearest section I could get back onto the sidewalk with. Cars were driving past me and honking at me, but I pressed on. I was able to return to the sidewalk, and a little ways up the sidewalk, there was a curb cut. That curb cut was my downfall that night. It was not on someone's property, as it was a curb cut to a crosswalk, and it was the city's responsibility to have it properly cleared, and it was not. And while there was no snow on it, there was also no rock salt. Seeing it looked clear, I rolled over it as I normally would, not intending to cross the street, but rather to continue straight down the sidewalk. I've done this many, many times before with no incident. However, this night in particular was different. This night, there was a sheet of unsalted black ice that covered that curb cut. When my power chair hit the very edge of the black ice, my power chair spun itself down the curb cut and into oncoming traffic. The cars all swerved out of the way and came to a stop. My wheelchair, too, finally came to a stop once I was off the black ice in the middle of the road. I quickly moved myself to the side of the road and began to cry as the adrenaline coursed through my veins. A kind person pulled over up ahead and got out of their car to come check on me. I was so startled by what had just happened, as my wheelchair has never lost control like that before, and I simply nodded through tears silently and continued on my way to the music school. It was after that night that I knew I could no longer remain in Northampton. It was that night that I had to make the unfortunate decision to not even return for social activities in the winter altogether. I no longer can visit my family in Northampton during the winter out of fear for what the sidewalks will be like. I know I cannot risk having my wheelchair thrown into oncoming traffic again. And I'm now a parent, and I will never allow my children to walk in Northampton in the winter. While I'm in a wheelchair, I found I have a more steady way of getting around than walking people. I can't be thrown off balance by the hustle and bustle of a crowd. I can get over cracks with no issue in the power chair that I was using that night. But my downfall was the black ice, and it was on a curb cut into a crosswalk. It was the city's responsibility to keep that properly cleared, and the city failed to do so. Furthermore, I never had to cross by that part of the sidewalk if the city had enforced the fines for not clearing the sidewalks. I would have been on the other side of the street, but the city failed to keep that cleared. And many could have been injured that night. And while I'm no longer a citizen, it's for this very reason at hand. I'm no longer a citizen of Northampton after living there my entire life, as the city cannot, as it stands, say that they keep their residents safe and their sidewalks clear. They cannot say they care about their disabled population when they do not enforce the snow removal and do not even follow it themselves. I am lucky no one died that night. The city should know it was pure luck that no one died that night due to their negligence. Thank you for letting me share my statement. And so, in closing, I think many of you who know me can surmise from my earlier exchange with Attorney Seawald that we may have a budding legal disagreement, an interpretation of what it means for the city to be responsible, and whether delegating to residents actually means that the city has discharged its duties. It wouldn't be the first time that we had a different interpretation of law. And certainly there wouldn't be much use for court stenographers or lawyers if everyone agreed all the time as to law. So I also look forward to having that memo from you. I would also welcome a coffee with you, any kind of deep dive into this issue in particular, just this issue would be great. But even if it turns out to not be our legal responsibility, or even if that is the city's official position, I really hope that we care enough to make this our responsibility. And I really hope that we hear that our constituents are willing and desirous of having their taxes pay for services just like this, having an investment in so many new pieces of equipment that can do this and so many new people who can do this. A balanced budget would prioritize something like this. It's a disability right, and it's our responsibility, again, in closing, as City Council, I feel, the charter says, to make sure we are keeping people safe. We are not being negligent. And this is very, very dangerous. Thank you.
Councilor Rothenberg, I'm going to now, there's a couple of people online who have their hands raised. I'm going to go to Alex Bowman. And I will say the same thing. If you would identify yourself, please, by name and your community of residence, and limit your comments to 2 minutes and address them to the committee, please.
Hi, this is Alex Bowman, Northampton, Ward 3. Thank you, Highway Department and police for navigating this difficult situation. I do want to say that the enforcing officer for 28-5-17, which is the snow and ice removal, says it's Department of Public Works Director or his or her designee, Chief of Police or his or her designee, or parking enforcement officers. So I think we should be looking at making sure that we have as many enforcing officers as possible to make sure this gets done efficiently when it does need to get done. And I also think that the city should look at adopting General Law 40U, which makes it so that any violations of housing, sanitary, or snow and ice requirements, after 30 days, those unpaid fines become a lien on the property. So that requires special adoption by the city. I don't know. I tried looking to see if that was done already. It does not look like it has been done. And that would also require a hearing, possibly, as well. A person in the city who would have hearings for violations. But I hope that the City Council will look into General Law 40U. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Is there anybody in the room who wants to offer a follow-up question or comment? I'll go to first somebody who hasn't spoken, Al Simon.
Thank you. Thank you for having this. Al Simon, Ward 2, sorry. Thank you for having this meeting. I think this is exactly the sort of thing the City Council it should be doing. Respectfully, I would suggest that the topic should have been a little broader to cover the entire storm handling, although that's been touched upon. I think it's safe to say that the city storm response did not meet expectations for many people. And while I understand the desire to look at a legal solution, I don't think primarily that's the best way to address this. I do think operational improvements are really the better way to go. I also think, being a month ago, that I would really, and this is going to be my question, I'd like to hear, what did the DPW department learn from the storm, and what would they do differently next time? There surely has to be something between nothing and spend $1 gazillion.
Okay, thank you. I see Becky Shannon online.
Hi, I'm Becky Shannon. I live in Ward 3. I am a bit surprised about the attitude of the Ward 3 counselor, Quaverly Rothenberg. I feel like she has been berating and the police chief and the DPW chief for their lack of caring, and they each explained their method of doing things in Northampton to try and be non-confrontational and to get the job done with a minimum of employees and with a sense of both budgeting as well as getting the job done. And if we had a greater workforce, but apparently it's impossible to hire people, we could have somebody on each corner making sure that the roads were passable for everybody. I'm an elderly person and I couldn't go outside. I live downtown in Ward 3, so I couldn't go for a walk unless I wore my cleats. I mean, you have to not have the expectation during storms that you can just have life as usual and that applies to everyone. And we need to start building community in Northampton so that we are getting these sidewalks cleaned because people have that social responsibility. I will say that I have taken pictures of sidewalks that have not been cleared, and I have sent them into the DPW's office and the mayor's office, and within 24 hours, those sidewalks are cleared. So I suggest that people take greater responsibility for making sure these things happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? We'll go back to Liz.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, we have a bone to pick with Commissioner Labarge because in Ward 3, I had a lot of trouble on my street with the plowing, and due respect to the head of DPW, they have a difficult job. But my question is, Conn Street was cleared, but my street, Wilson Avenue, which is a dead end and neglected for all kinds of reasons, was not cleared properly during that storm. And I'm wondering, are the side streets cleared as well as the main avenues by the snowplows? I could not walk on the sidewalk, as I had mentioned in my earlier testimony, and I was willing to go on the street, but I couldn't go on the street because the street was not adequately plowed or sanded or salted. And my compliment to the committee member, Labarge, is that I agree with your prior comment that the owners, the developers and the owners of apartment buildings should be more adequately notified by the city. I think that's a good approach to take of their responsibility to clear the sidewalks. I think that was a great suggestion. When I contacted the owners of Kiter, and again, they said, well, sorry, it's a bad storm. But this went on for days, and they had maintenance people that they wouldn't send out again because it's too much work. So I finally reached them as the owners and impressed upon them that they can also use sand, which was a total surprise, apparently. My other comment is that from lived experience and from my perusal of the scientific literature, I think climate change is going to increase the amount of rain we have and subsequent freezing in these storms. I think that the mayor mentioned, I don't think she's here, the mayor mentioned that these storms are going to get more rare, unless I'm mistaken. I think they're going to get more frequent. The challenge to the committee and the city is that what are we going to do? Because this is going to, in my opinion, become a lot more frequent in the winters. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Winston.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on my earlier comment, and I appreciate you, Councilor Labarge, mentioning it to the head of the DPW about the snow removal on Main Street. So what I'm hearing the DPW director saying that they have the ability, but they're not doing it, but they'll magically be able to do it if we go through with this proposed redesign, which is even more of a reason for us to have a trial run during the winter to see whether first responders, police, ambulance, fire trucks can get through, especially with a narrowed Main Street. And how can we clear Main Street during a snowstorm? We've never done it before. I'll grant you this was a very difficult last storm, but anyone that's lived here during winters knows that this was not the first storm, and it won't be the last storm, where the snow sits in the middle of Main Street and obstructs pedestrians, cars, bikers, you name it. We'll talk to Attorney Seawald about the foreseeability of blocking the roads with snow in the middle of cities, which most cities don't. So if we have the ability to do it, and we're not, but we're going to wait for a redesign when a road is narrowed, we should be doing it now. We should be having a trial run before we go ahead with this project, if the city still wants to do it, and see if the city really has the ability to clear the snow from the middle of Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask Nathan. Nathan, you have your hand up? Okay.
Hi, Nathan Chung, Northampton resident. Yeah, I think this is a lot of interesting dilemmas and conflicts coming together. I actually helped a senior citizen with their snow clearing. These things, gas snowblowers, they weigh about 100 to 200 pounds, and she just was not in the conditions to do it. And this is a very unpopular idea to bring up, but I think one dilemma we might have to consider is we are in an aging society. There maybe used to be more abundant people willing to do these things, but as people age and the percentage of aging population increases throughout the state, actually, possibly, a lot of these dilemmas will come up. And one interesting blog I've been reading is this blog titled Dear Winnipeg. It's a blog about municipal finance and infrastructure. They have an article called Snow Money, Snow Problems. It's based in Canada. This might be completely unrealistic, but one of the ideas he talked about was, since it costs so much more money to maintain clean vehicular roads compared to sidewalks, he suggested that moving some of that, reducing the frequency of vehicular road clearance and then moving that savings into sidewalk clearing. I know that's a huge question. It might be completely unrealistic for the city of Northampton, but I know there are some different perspectives out there. But I think one interesting dilemma moving forward will be there are lots of forces happening: aging population, changing demographics, changing labor force. There are not a lot of people now who are able to do more physical work, and not just because you're older. In general, there's just this loss of physical skills. So everything will need to be kind of considered and come together. And sorry for bringing up a difficult topic, but I just wanted to bring that up based on my personal experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I wanted to ask Director Lascalia if you have any response. There were two questions that were asked. If you wanted to address the, I think Liz left, but the question about side streets in particular and the timing of clearing those. And then the bigger picture question about did you learn anything from this past storm that would affect how you might do things differently the next time there's a severe storm of long duration and multiple kinds of precipitation?
I stand behind my employees and I stand behind our response to this storm. We did the absolute best we could under incredibly difficult circumstances. This was a 30+ hour event with 4 different types of precipitation, and to suggest that we had a botched response or that we were not operationally prepared or that we somehow did something wrong is simply untrue. So I stand behind my department. I am mindful that many people were inconvenienced by the road conditions, and I understand that. And it's my job to make sure that the roads are cleared to the extent we possibly can, and that the sidewalks for which we're responsible are cleared to the extent that we can. But there are some times that the weather is simply too much. And this is why the power goes out, and sometimes it takes days for it to come back on. And that's why it snows, and sometimes it takes us some time to get the roads clear. And that's weather. It does not suggest some sort of operational failure where we need to, clean house or do some sort of review. We successfully clear and maintain our roads with the resources that are available to us. And again, I stand behind my department and everybody in it. Regarding Conn Street and Wilson Ave, our priority in storms like this, where we understand that we are having a long duration response, and where we understand that we have 160 miles of roadway that are all flash freezing at the same time, our primary responsibility is to keep main arterials open. And that's what we do. We have to keep the arterials and the collectors open. And that's why Conn Street was clear. That's why Elm Street was clear. A dead-end road like Wilson Ave, when we are dealing with having to triage because everything is freezing at the same time, is simply not a priority, because we need to make sure that emergency services can move throughout the city. So Wilson Avenue was addressed like all other streets were addressed. But when we have a simultaneous flash freeze throughout the city, we have to focus our resources on the main arterial roads, and Conn Street is one of them. I don't have enough sanders in my fleet to hit every single side street at the same time and make sure that it's black and completely de-iced. So if we can get Conn Street clear, if we can get the main arterials clear, if we can then focus on the collectors, then we can get emergency services as close as possible to all of the places they need to get to. And then we can co-respond if we have to a place like Wilson Ave if fire or police needs to get there. But we have to actually take our resources and we have to triage those resources and hit the main arterials first. Hope that answers both questions.
Thank you. Okay, we are concluding this section of our meeting, and I want to thank Director Liscalia, Chief Cartledge, the Mayor, City Solicitor Seawald, all the people who contributed thoughts, comments, questions, ideas. I will say that I am certain that the 4 counselors on this committee will make sure that this conversation continues. So thank you. Okay, we have one more piece of business, and that is we have 6 appointments, new appointments that were referred to us on March 6th, and they will need to be interviewed. Our next meeting is Monday, April 7th, and that gives us 2 weeks. I have already heard from 2 counselors who independently contacted me and have expressed interest in interviewing the two candidates for appointment to the Whiting Street Fund. They are Colleen Weil, and Council Labarge has asked to interview her, and Edith Ellen, and Councilor Rothenberg asked to interview her. That leaves the following four appointees. Sophia Baez for the Human Rights Commission. She lives in Ward 4. Wyatt Hermanson, also Human Rights Commission. He lives in Ward 1. Asher Henricks, Disability Commission, Ward 3. And the Urban Forestry Commission appointee is Kent Johnson, lives in Ward 4. And I mentioned the wards because one of the ways that we divide up responsibility for the interviews is if an appointee lives in one of our wards, that typically we would do the interview. But I'm going to go first to Councilor Dubs. There are a number of options here, Councilor, for you, if you want to do one or two. There are two remaining who live in Ward 4, if you want to take both of them, or I know you have an interest in the Disability Commission.
Yes, I was going to ask if Councilor Rothenberg doesn't mind if I interviewed Asher Henriksen for the Disability Commission, which is a Ward 3 resident.
I would be willing to trade urban forestry, which is a Ward 4 resident.
Let's do it. That sounds great.
Is that all right with the chair?
Okay, so just to make sure I'm understanding, Jeremy or Councilor Dubs, you're going to interview Asher Henricks, and Councilor Rothenberg, you're interested in interviewing Kent Johnson, the Forestry Commission. Okay. In that case, I will take Wyatt Hermanson, Human Rights Commission, who lives in Ward 1. I will interview Wyatt, and that leaves us with Sophia Baez, who is the other appointee to the Human Rights Commission, who lives in Ward 4. So,
but I don't mind interviewing Sophia Baez.
okay, so that's great. Everybody has their assignments, and if you would let me know, the agenda for the April 7th meeting will be posted. April 3rd is our next full city council, that Thursday. So if you're having any problems by April 3rd getting the interviews done, let me know. Okay. Otherwise, we'll plan to have all of those done for reports and recommendations at our next meeting, April 7th. Okay, thank you.
Do me a favor, read off the names, please.
Yes. Sophia Baez, Human Rights Commission, will be interviewed by Councilor Dubs. Wyatt Hermanson, Human Rights Commissioner, will be interviewed by me. Asher Henricks, Disability Commission, will be interviewed by Councilor Dubs. Colleen Weil, Whiting Street Fund, will be interviewed by you, Councilor Labarge. Edith Ellis, Whiting Street Fund, will be interviewed by Councilor Rothenberg. Kent Johnson, Urban Forestry Commission, will be interviewed by Councilor Rothenberg. Okay. Is there any new business today?
Nope.
Okay, then a motion to adjourn would be.
To adjourn.
Second that.
Motion made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Dubs. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous adjournment at 6:19. Thank you.